stories that carry emotion have 4 times more likelihood of driving long-term brand equity. Because often brands come expecting to talk to our team immediately about production. I find it can be so valuable to take a step back and spend time to first evaluate different stories. What makes each one of them good? By doing that, you can land on stories that just add so much more value.
Let's bring in CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh.
Developing this morning reports that new first
what
best
could be a
friend...
major game changer. 14 patients with advanced rectal cancer are
breaking news and a lot of it. The appointments are coming pretty fast.
CNN is far more than breaking news. You know, we tell stories from all around the world, stories that cover really everything that people care about.
Can you tell me about your stories?
I studied journalism and philosophy back in the day. I majored in documentary production. I was lucky that my first job was interning at a production company and working on an environmental documentary series. So that kind of set the direction for what I wanted to do. And then I worked as a video journalist and a video producer for a lot of media companies, other media companies like Reuters and Wall Street Journal as well. But I do remember while I was a freelancer, more and more brands were interested in story-led documentaries. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed working with brands and finding that balance between the message that they wanted to convey. That's what eventually landed me at CNN in CNN's branded content studio, Create. And that's where I've been for the last 5 years.
Can you tell me what you actually do in CNN?
Yeah, so I'm head of creative production and I manage all of our Asia branded content productions. So I also work with brands to help find and craft stories that are going to hit the business objectives for them, but also really connect with audiences.
I think we share quite similar path. I started working as a journalist 15, 16 years ago. And yeah, we used to work with camera and microphone and go to the field being a bit of like correspondent. But now eventually I'm gonna have to move back to work more on the management side, on business, and collaborate with a lot of companies and branding. So can you tell me more about the transitional period that you had?
When I was working as a video producer, my focus was very much on trying to make highly like cinematic content. I was also really interested in the gear and the camera equipment. I was constantly researching how I can get better lenses, better sound equipment, a better stabilizer, or a stabilization rig, things like that. I was very focused on the technical craft. I think as I transitioned into branded content, it becomes less about like your own skills and your own talent, and more about trying to like leverage the skills of a big group of people. Because actually, when you work on bigger and bigger, more high stakes projects, it becomes less about your own ability and more about your ability to recognize the talent of a lot of different people and bring it all together. What I've learned is that when you're working with brands, you're not only partnering with like the marketing teams in the company. Sometimes you're partnering with their product teams. Sometimes you're partnering with some other departments in another side of the world. Sometimes it's the communications or legal team. Maybe the CEO or the CMO wants to become a reviewer in the content. So I think one thing that I've learned is that you have to become even better at communicating and articulating creative when you have such kind of intricate stakeholder management while you kind of creating really good content as well.
You have to be creative. At the same time, you have to stick to a lot of journalism values. So how do you navigate that?
I don't see any kind of conflict between, you know, journalism and creativity. Those things are the same in my mind, but because I work within the realm of non-fiction storytelling, right? I'm not writing scripts from scratch. What we do is really a documentary style approach to branded content. So we're working within the realm of journalism already, where we're trying to tell authentic stories, but we're trying to tell authentic stories with brands. So that's the beauty of it, I think, is, as I said, my first kind of love was documentaries. So when I think of creativity, it's creativity within that kind of non-fiction documentary storytelling approach.
Can you tell me some example of brands that you have been working with?
Well, we work with brands all around the world across different industries. So automotive brands, luxury brands, travel and tourism brands, every different type of brand we've worked with. Last year, we worked with Samsung, and I think this is a nice example of what we do. If you look at the microplastics in the ocean, 35% of them come from when we wash our clothes in washing machine, the shedding from our clothes. So Samsung did a lot of work into the research into how to reduce this. They worked with scientists and with other organizations. And they came up with a new line of washing machines that filters out almost all of the microplastics from the clothes. So then when we started working with them, it was the challenge of trying to think, what's a kind of a story-led way of introducing this kind of new range of products that they have. So we try to find the human perspective on that. So it goes back to kind of really basic storytelling techniques, right? If there's a human protagonist at the center of it, people are going to connect a lot with it, and they're gonna trust it. They're gonna be interested in it because people care about people. We started by thinking, okay, who are other people that are aligned with this mission of trying to protect the oceans? So then we naturally thought about different scientists, and we look at different scientists all around the world, and we ended up landing on the scientist in Italy called Martina, who lives in the small town called San Benedetto del Toronto, and she researches ocean microplastics. She teaches at the university there. She also educates kids about preserving the environment. She's also deeply in love with the ocean there and has always loved the ocean from a young child. So she connected on so many different levels, and she was an amazing person. So we were so lucky that we put the time into searching and finding for a human story that was going to help to tell the brand story. And help to introduce the product, but also align on that value level about protecting the environment. So that's an example of what we do.
When you get to talk to clients, what are some common advice that you find useful when you reach them?
Oh, that's a great question, because that's every day. I would say something which comes up very often is the importance of story finding. Because often brands come expecting to talk to our team immediately about production. Or can we go and shoot that story over there? But I find it can be so valuable to take a step back and spend time going through the different merits of different stories. So sometimes we spend quite a long time working with brands to first evaluate different stories and what makes each one of them good. And kind of sifting out ones that we think are a little bit weaker and then shortlisting ones that we think are stronger. This can take a long time, but by doing that, you can land on stories that just add so much more value, that are like the most representative of what the brand wants to say. Don't underestimate how important it can be to go through the story finding process as well as the story making process. For me, there's like two things that I look for that I think are going to make for really compelling stories. And the first, is there the potential for the story to carry really strong emotion? And I know it sounds like obvious and intuitive that stories that make you feel something are going to be better, but it has real value for brands. So new studies show that stories that carry emotion have 4 times more likelihood of driving long-term brand equity, for people to really care about the brand in the long term. So stories with emotion is really, really valuable for brands. And then it's not just a simple idea of only positive emotion, but a range of emotions within a story can be really, really effective as well. So, but you only really get that when you have a story that has different layers and it has a story arc. So what I would also kind of look for when evaluating stories is there an arc here? And the essential stage within a story arc is the rising incident or inciting action. That's like the obstacle or the challenge that the protagonist is facing and trying to overcome. So if a story has emotion and it has a kind of a challenge which allows for an arc, then I think that's going to create a really compelling story. And I would lean towards that when looking for stories.
Finding stories, I think that's the essence of working in journalism, and that's also can transmit when you work in brand as well.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not just something for editorial or news. Story finding is important for all kind of non-fiction storytelling. There's amazing stories out there, and brands are doing amazing things. Even within their organizations, there's amazing stories that you can find. So to spend time evaluating stories can be really valuable.
What about the cultures and contexts that you get to work in Asia? Is there anything that you have learned that you might not expect it at first place?
That's a really interesting question, because we work across a lot of different markets. I would say globally, everywhere from the Middle East to Japan and Korea, Europe, China, Southeast Asia. There's a lot of different cultures that we're working with, so we have to be really cognizant of that. But I think you have to become better at fluidly working within these different cultures and understanding that there's a different way of doing things. When we work with Japanese clients, there's a particular way that we have to do things. When we work with clients in China or clients in the Middle East, but that's all part of, I think, what makes the job of content creation so interesting as well, is we get to learn so much from different cultures as we work with them. We worked with a lot of brands who are doing a lot in the sustainability space, but we also recognize that the process of producing content also has an impact on the environment. So flights, hotels, accommodation, energy, catering, all of this emits carbon as well. So we're really conscious about this. But as we make stories, and some of these stories being sustainability stories, we want to make sure that we're not harming the environment. So we've come up with what we call create responsibly. And what that does is it's our kind of mission on how we can make advertising content, but we can reduce its impact on the environment. So since January 2023, all of our film shoots have been carbon neutral completely. And how we do that is we use a carbon calculator. So all of these decisions that go into our productions, from crewing and flights and accommodation and transport, etc., we measure their carbon impact. And by having the insights of the carbon cost of different aspects of a production, we're able to make more informed decisions and reduce where necessary. And then for whatever we aren't able to reduce, we partner with an organization called Ecology to find different carbon removal projects and offset the equivalent amount of carbon. That's how we make our film shoots carbon neutral. So we've now offset over 100 productions, which is the equivalent of 218 long-haul 7+ hour flights. And we funded over 18 different carbon projects. So we're taking this really, really importantly, really seriously. And we hope a lot of other kind of brands and agencies will also kind of join in kind of producing content, but reducing the environmental impact of producing content.
I believe that a lot of media students, journalism students, their dream must be like working with the CNN. What are some tips and some knowledge that you want to tell them in order to, like, if they want basically like in 5 years they want to work with you or they want to work in your position?
Wow, that's such a great question. I think in any kind of creative field, there's almost no direct path. I think that's what makes these fields interesting, that people have different ways of entering them and different experiences, but that's what makes them bring value as well. What I've realized over time, and I think because in our studio we collaborate with a lot of different creative people, I think there's certain like kind of behaviors or attitudes that make people successful. Because creatives can be very talented, but almost talent is not enough alone to be successful. So I've actually I come up with a kind of a checklist of qualities that I think make people really good to work with, and it's called check. The C is curiosity, H is humility, E is empathy, C is courage, and K is kindness. So it might not be the answer that you expected, but I find that if you want to be an effective creative, you need to have these qualities to make your to win trust and to get traction. So curiosity is the first thing, because I think if you're working in non-fiction storytelling, you need to ask questions, many questions, to dig down into the story, to find that little kernel within the story that makes it story worthy, that you want to put the microscope on. And then I would say humility, because as you work on bigger productions, it's not just about your own talent, it's about recognizing the talent of other people. Empathy, because as you work with different stakeholders, different collaborators, you need to have genuine concern for where they're coming from when they ask you something, or when they say no to you, or when they have demands of you. You need to really have concern for where they stand on that, why they're saying that, and that's going to actually win traction. And then courage is so important, because sometimes when you're doing creative work, you have to stick your neck out if you see things going in a direction that's not going to be best for the story. And that can be difficult. You know, we talk about stakeholder management, you know, a lot's riding on a deal. But ultimately, I think it's going to be better for the project if you stick your neck out and you have the courage to say, actually, I think we should go in this direction. And then finally, kindness, because that's how you're going to be able to build relationships and win loyalty to be able to get anything done. So these seem like really obvious things, but actually when you're doing production, creative production, sometimes these obvious things, you can forget them. But yeah, curiosity, humility, empathy, courage, kindness. I think these are the qualities that I think are going to help you be successful with the creativity that you have.
A lot of creative people find difficult to switch your head off and get proper sleep. How do you compose yourself? How do you taking care of yourself when working in the industry that you know, like require a lot of your brain power? But at the same time, you need to be healthy, you know, both mentally and physically as well.
I spend a lot of time reading about industry stuff and research, but to switch off, I just watch stuff that can take me away from that as well. So I'll just like to watch documentaries or just general entertainment movies. That helps me unwind as well. I love outdoorsy things. I go hiking. I love cooking. I find cooking is a really good way to unstress at the end of the day. Is that what you're after?
I mean, aside from the personal aspect, I want people to learn from, you know, like people who work in a top organization that you know, like eventually people need to switch off, because otherwise our head gonna be wired to all the information, all the news feed,
Yeah, it's a difficult one, and I don't know if I'm particularly good at it. You know, when you have to deal with a lot of kind of demands throughout the day, to kind of switch off at the end of the day is can be really difficult, and especially as it's so easy to stay connected with work on our phones. I need to put my phone on the other side of the room a lot of times. But I think that's when I like to come home and cook. If I can cook a meal, that gives me something really simple to do with my hands. And it helps me to forcibly not to remove myself from work. I think that's one thing I like to do to disconnect from work a little bit, is to go home and cook.